Today, I thought I'd bring you a story from a cold place because it's such a hot day outside. Back last year, I was in Alaska, and it was cold even though it was summer at that time. So today, I'm going to tell you a story that I heard when I was there. This is the story. First of all, do you even know where Alaska is? Does anybody know where Alaska is? No? No? Well, I'll show you. Here's your nugget of learning for today. We're down there at the bottom. We're the yellow Australia. And if you follow that purple line up, that's Alaska. It's on the top of the world. If you were to hop in an airplane right now, it would take you a whole day to get there on an airplane. So you'd have a sleep on the plane, and then in the morning at this very same time, you'd wake up in Alaska. So it took me a long time to get there. And because it's on the top of the world, it's cold. Just like on the very bottom of the world, it's cold as well. In the middle is the equator where it's warm, but on the top and the bottom, it's cold. In fact, this week, there was so much snow in one town that it covered up most of the houses, and it sunk lots of boats in the ocean because the snow was so heavy on those boats. So maybe we are lucky that it's a hot day here. Rightio. So this is the story of Granite, and Granite is a sled dog. In the winter, it's really hard to go on the roads in Alaska, so people, 100 years ago, that's the only way they had to go, was with dogs pulling sleds. So that dog's name is Granite, and the lady's name is Susan. And sled dogs, they love to race. When I was there, I got to help some dogs train. The dogs in the summertime, they have to pull those quad bikes. They don't put the engine on, and they attach the dogs on leads to the quad bikes, and the dogs pull the people. And that's how they train during the summer when there's no snow. So this is the Iditarod Trail Race. It is 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers. Do you know how far that is? No, it's a long, long way. Did you hear about the Sydney to Hobart boat race on Boxing Day? Well, basically, it's the same distance, but these dogs run on the land and even over a frozen bit of the ocean on that red trail, and it takes them about 3 weeks to do that race, between 10 days and 3 weeks. Whereas the boat race, that only takes about a week. So the dogs go over the mountains, the rivers, the valleys, and it's a very, very long, hard race. But the dogs love it. The dogs that I met this summer, they just love to race. As soon as they see the harness come out, they just jump and they bark, and they're just so excited. They love to race. Anyways, let's dive into the story. Yes, I described the race. This race, it honors dogs and mushers. Mushers are the names of the people that guide the dogs. They ride on the sled. So if you are the person that guides the dogs, you're called a musher. So the race honors dogs and mushers who hauled the mail, supplies, and life-saving medicine through the Alaska wilderness over 100 years ago. One dog in the Iditarod race came to epitomize or represent the strength, courage, and intelligence of those dogs long ago, and his name was Granite. Oh, let's turn the pictures. There we go. This is where the dogs stay. They each have their own little house, and it's far apart from the other dogs so they can't bite or bother each other. They get let off every day to exercise. Yeah, and the dogs, that's just what they were doing when I saw them as well. Susan lived alone in the Alaska wilderness with her sled dogs. Her home was a little log cabin. Susan was a musher, so in the winter she traveled across the snow-covered trails on a dog sled. The dogs loved pulling her sled, and she loved them in return. One spring day, while Susan was feeding her dogs, she heard a familiar sound. Puppies were being born. Quietly, she walked over to the barn. Listening at the door, she heard cooing. Slowly, she looked inside, and there on a cozy bed of straw were 5 newborn pups. Their mother gently nuzzled them, and cleaned each one with her tongue as they laid curled up next to her. All the pups were shiny, fat, and healthy, except for one. His fur was dull, He had knock knees, and he let the others push him away from their mother. Susan loved the puppies and was proud of each one. She was always showing them off to the other mushers who visited. Again and again, the visitors would say they all looked great, except for the timid one. They said that he would never become a real sled dog and that she should give him away to someone as a pet. But Susan believed in him, so she gave him a strong name, Granite. Granite is a really, really strong kind of a rock. When the puppies were old enough, she started taking them on daily walks in the woods. Susan and the puppies developed a close bond. Susan watched Granite and was impressed by his intelligence. He always knew where he was because he remembered the trails that they had taken before. Even when they went somewhere new, he could find his way home alone, while his brothers and sisters closely followed Susan so they wouldn't get lost. Every evening they ran together to develop his strength, and she was sure that someday he would race on her team. Granite grew to be a strong 26-kilogram, deep-chested, fast dog. Do any of you weigh 26 kilos? Probably not. The dog was heavier than you. I once looked after an Alaska Malamute dog, and that dog weighed more than me, and he walked me when I looked after that dog. Anyway, so Granite grew up to be strong. He overcame his knock-kneed legs with a powerful stride. He pulled the sled better than the others, and his confidence grew. He learned to lead the team. Leaders need to be able to guide the team over rough trails, find the way when they're lost, and to run fast. And Granite did all three. After years of work, Granite became the main lead dog of Susan's racing team. At the start of his first Iditarod, that's the name of that race, Granite seemed to sense it was a race. He stood in the front of the team with his head held high, waiting for the command to go. Finally, the race started, and Granite charged down the trail. Susan was amazed by him. They would stop often to eat and rest. Those dogs don't like to stop and eat and rest. They have to teach the dogs to stop. When it was time to go again, Granite would be the first to jump to his feet, barking and prancing, anxious to head down the trail. Soon they were leading the race. One night, when they crested a small hill, there was a trail ahead. There in the trail ahead of them stood an angry moose. Do you know what a moose is? They're about the size of a horse. They have really strong hooves, and the male ones have antlers. Susan stopped the team to let the moose get away, but it didn't run. Instead, it charged into the team, kicking and stomping. Granite lunged at the moose, trying to protect his teammates, but the moose kicked him and he flew against a tree. When the attack was over, Susan saw the damage the moose had done. She gently cared for her injured teammates. So even though she's a human, she's part of the team. They're all the team, the dog and the humans. Care for her teammates. Before deciding that for the good of her beloved dogs, they should leave their dream of winning behind. They withdrew from the race. She took her bruised and battered team home, but she promised the dogs that next year they would win. People doubted Susan and Granite. They often said, Susan will never win the Iditarod because she babies her dogs. Susan didn't listen to them, and she continued to care for her dogs the way she always had. It was a long, hard year. Susan and the dogs worked tirelessly to recover. In the fall, Susan and her dogs started running every day, training for the race. One day, on a short run, Susan saw Granite falter. She stopped the team and rushed to him. It was quickly clear to her that something was wrong. Granite tried to get to his feet, but he couldn't get to his feet. Granite's temperature was soaring, his heart was racing, and he was fading fast. Granite needed help, but help was far away. In Alaska, they can't always get places on roads, so sometimes you have to fly, or taking a boat is the fastest way to get there. So she bundled him up, and they flew to a veterinary hospital. The doctor held out little hope for his recovery. Susan set up a cot next to Granite and stayed with him day and night, petting him and willing him to live. Granite lived, but the veterinarian gently told Susan he will never race again because the illness had damaged his heart. When Granite was able, they flew back home. Susan and the dogs continued to train while Granite rested in the cabin, watching the leaves turn colors and slowly fall. Before the snow came, the dogs pulled Susan on a four-wheeled cart to get stronger. Granite cried and howled every time the team left him behind, but he was determined to get better. Slowly but surely, Granite showed improvement. The veterinarian told Susan that Granite he could start running loose with the puppies. As winter came, Granite was back with the team, but only training with the young dogs on shorter runs. Meanwhile, the main racing team was running many miles under the northern lights. Still, every night after Susan returned, Granite would sleep on her bed. Gradually, his strength returned. The doctor was amazed by his progress. As a test of his recovery, Susan let him run a short race with the younger dogs. Granite proved he was healthy by leading the team to victory. His determination, drive, and strength convinced Susan he could race the Iditarod again. But had his endurance come back, could he finish the 1,600-kilometer race? The Iditarod started in early March. Granite was at the starting line, leading her team again. To win, they had to beat last year's champion. Day after day, the two teams raced, always close to each other. The trail turned out to be tough for Susan and her team. The sled broke, and many times they were lost, but Granite never faltered. Near the end of the race, the two teams were only 17 seconds apart. Susan and Granite were ahead, but suddenly the other team passed them and pulled away. Susan thought, well, I guess second place is okay. Then she looked at the dogs working so hard and remembered her promise to them. This is our year to win. She called out to Granite, and he responded. They charged by the other team. Again, they led in the race. As they left a village 160 kilometers from the finish line in Nome, a furious storm hit. Susan could not see the trail, but Granite kept on going. Finally, the snow was blowing across the ground so thick that Susan couldn't even see Granite at the front of the team. Granite had to find the trail on his own. From time to time, he would get lost, so Susan would lean into the wind and walk up to the front of the team to help him regain the trail. Together, they went on. As the storm raged, Susan's arms were becoming frozen. She could barely hang on to the sled. They had to get to shelter soon. Granite saw that Susan needed his help. Finally, Susan couldn't move at all. Her arms were hurting so badly, she started to lose hope. But Granite kept forging ahead. He knew Susan was in trouble, and it was up to him to get them through. The other dogs were following his lead. If he quit, they would too, and all would be lost. He kept going, step after step, on through the blizzard. Susan was quiet and hunched over the sled. This was it. Suddenly, they saw dim lights from the next checkpoint. They had made it through the blizzard. Susan and the team rested there, eating hot meals throughout the stormy night. In the morning, they ran the last 120 kilometers to Nome and won the Iditarod. All of the other teams in the race had been turned back by the storm and didn't finish until 18 hours later. Susan and Granite had done it. They had won the Iditarod and set a new record. The next 2 years, they won again, with Granite proudly leading the team. With Susan's love and Granite's strength, they became unstoppable. Now those same people who hadn't believed in them said, it's no wonder they win the race because she takes the best care of her dogs and they take care of her. Isn't that an amazing story? Isn't it amazing how Granite started out small and dull and not very impressive? And no one else thought he would be anything except for Susan. This kind of reminds me of a story in the Bible. Remember in the Bible times when Israel needed a new king and Samuel was supposed to find a new king? He went to a man named Jesse, and Jesse brought out all his sons, and he said, "Here, choose a king from these ones." But Samuel didn't get the word that any of those were right. So he asked Jesse, "Do you have any more sons?" And then Jesse said, "Yeah, I have one more. His name is David. He just looks after the sheep." But then as soon as Samuel saw that one, God said, "This is the one." And that's the way it is with us. God sees the inside of us, not just the outside. We may be small, we may not be very impressive, but God sees the inside, just like Susan could see the inside of Granite, and Jesus, or God, could see the inside of David. He knew he would be a great king. Should we try to follow that same example? When we meet new people, should we perhaps not look just on the outside and look for their kindness and strength and good things on the inside? Why don't you think about that this week? And as you go back to school, this is the real Susan, the real photo of Susan and her family. I'll tell you just a little bit more about what happened with Granite. Granite won every race he entered at least once. In 1988, he became the only lead dog to ever win the Iditarod 3 times in a row. Granite retired from racing after Susan's 4th Iditarod victory. He traveled extensively with Susan and even went to the White House to visit the president. But his favorite place was always their cabin in the wilderness, where he watched the puppy teams head down the trails on their own adventures. There you go. Thanks for listening so well.